In the grim darkness of the far future, not all who fight for the Imperium do so out of honor or choice. Some are born into chains before they ever see a battlefield. Among the endless legions of mankind's armies, there exists a breed of giants, human in form, whose only destiny is to be wielded as weapons. They are the Ogryns, colossal, simple-minded, and bound to the Imperium's will. To outsiders, they appear as brutes, lumbering walls of flesh and bone. To the Imperial Guard, they are battering rams, living shields, and disposable tools. But behind their immense frames lies a life of endless servitude, a living hell disguised as loyalty. The camps that hold them reek of sweat, rust, and oil, their bodies pressed into service long before they can comprehend what service even means. Overseers bark orders. Commissars measure their worth not in courage but in obedience. The Ogryns do not dream of freedom. Most have never even been taught what freedom is. Instead, their world is reduced to simple commands. Advance. Hold the line. Die for the Emperor. Yet within their broad chests, hearts still beat. However dulled their minds, however stripped their souls, they feel hunger, they feel pain, they feel loss. And in the rare quiet between bombardments, when the fires dim and the shouting ceases, some of them remember fragments of lives stolen, a hill where the sky was blue, a mother's hand teaching them to count, the taste of bread shared in laughter. Those memories ache in silence, because the Imperium has no room for the humanity of its slaves. This is their story not of glory, but of bondage, not of victory, but of survival in a war that will never end. A war where their bodies are fodder, their minds shackled, their names forgotten. A war in which the only reward for loyalty is to be sent once more into the maw of death. The Ogryns do not choose. They march, they bleed, they die. And in the endless night of the 41st millennium, they live in chains, chained not only by steel and whip, but by the very empire they are forced to protect. The Imperium of Man calls them abhuman, a polite word in a galaxy where politeness is a mask for cruelty. Once long ago, their ancestors were colonists scattered across hostile worlds. Exposure to gravity-crushing planets, poisoned air, and centuries of hardship twisted their bloodlines. Where once stood ordinary men and women, evolution or perhaps degeneration carved hulking forms, towering frames, bone-thick skulls, hands like hammers. Their strength grew vast, but their intellect withered, narrowed to simplicity. The High Lords of Terror looked upon these mutated cousins of humanity with disdain. In any other case, abhumans were exterminated, burned out as deviations from the holy standard. But Ogryns were different. They were useful, too strong to waste, too pliant to resist. The Imperium does not reward uniqueness, but it always hungers for tools. And so the Ogryns were spared, not out of mercy, but out of utility. From the moment of birth, their lives are shackled. Ogryn children learn not through play, but through drills. Overseers bark numbers and commands, beating the rhythm of obedience into minds that still yearn for simple joys. The strongest are herded into regiments, while the weaker are left behind to toil in mines, factories, or agricultural pits where their size and stamina make them little better than beasts of burden. On some worlds, entire valleys are nothing but Ogryn pens, settlements where generations rise and fall without ever glimpsing freedom. Their culture, a patchwork of half-remembered songs and nursery chants, drowned beneath the roar of war drums. The Imperium claims to civilize them with training programs, bonehead implants drilled into their skulls, crude augmetics to make them smarter, or at least less likely to misinterpret an order. The procedure is agony, a crude surgery that leaves scars glowing with faint circuitry. Those who survive the operation are paraded as success stories, proof that even brutes can be shaped into loyal hounds. Those who fail, their bodies are carted away to the pyres, another lesson to the survivors that their lives are not their own. Yet for all the pain and degradation, the Ogryns remain faithful. Faithful not out of true belief, but out of conditioning, habit, and the desperate hope that obedience might win them a smile or a scrap of kindness from their human masters. They adore commissars and officers who treat them with the barest measure of respect, clinging to words like good lad or brave boy, as though they were treasures. In their enormous hands, such fragile gifts are held more carefully than weapons. But the truth, stark and merciless, is this. Ogryns were never meant to be free. Their very existence in the Imperium is defined by servitude. They are raised to be chained, trained to be used, and discarded the moment their usefulness runs dry. Unlike the grand heroes of the Space Marines or the sacred sisters of battle, Ogryns are not immortalized in statues or hymns. They are remembered only by the number of enemy corpses they left behind, and even then, their names vanish into ledgers marked casualties expendable. Imagine being born into such a world. Imagine never being given the chance to dream of anything beyond the next march, the next meal, the next order. That is the curse of the Ogryn. That is the root of their living hell. To walk through an Ogryn encampment is to walk through a factory where flesh itself is the raw material. There are no songs of valor here, no proud banners snapping in the wind. The air is heavy with the stink of sweat and damp canvas, the iron tang of recycled rations, the faint reek of blood that never seems to wash away. Rows of tents or crude corrugated shacks stretch endlessly, each crammed with bodies too large for the space they occupy. Ogryns crouch like penned cattle, their massive shoulders brushing against the flimsy walls, their heads bent because the ceiling was never built for giants. Overseers stalk between the rows, their presence marked by the crack of whips or the thud of shock batons. A misplaced word, a stumble in formation, even a confused look, all can earn a strike. To the Imperium, discipline is more important than dignity. And for Ogryns, dignity was a luxury they were never granted. Food is slop ladled from rusting vats, nutrient paste so bland it strips the tongue of taste. To an Ogryn, hunger is constant. Their massive frames require sustenance far beyond what the guard is willing to provide. They eat whatever falls into their hands, spoiled bread, discarded scraps, sometimes even the boots of their fallen comrades boiled into tasteless broth. It is not rare to see them chewing bones, not for the marrow, but simply for the memory of meat. Sleep is no mercy either. The camps echo with the groaning of giants unable to rest, bodies too large for the cots provided, nightmares too loud to silence. Some Ogryns whimper like children, their deep voices shaking the tent poles as they relive battles where they were ordered to charge through fire and barbed wire. Others snore so heavily that they wake themselves, sitting upright in terror, certain that the sound is enemy artillery. And always there is the counting. Every dawn, Ogryns are herded into lines, counted and recounted, like livestock. Overseers bark numbers, commissars observe with cold eyes, and the weak are dragged away. Sometimes those too sick to march are shot on the spot, not out of cruelty, but out of efficiency. A coughing soldier is a liability, and the Imperium has no patience for liabilities. Their deaths are not recorded in honor rolls, they are tallied as attrition. Occasionally, a spark of kindness intrudes. A guardsman, weary from the same endless war, might share a crust of bread or a few words of comfort. Ogryns, starved of affection, cling to these gestures with desperate loyalty. To be called friend or brother by a human soldier is to be given a name beyond beast. Some Ogryns carve crude tokens from wood or metal, crude representations of comrades they admire. They carry them into battle, clutching them even as bullets tear through their flesh. But for every moment of kindness, there are 10 of cruelty. Commissars sneer at their ignorance. Officers treat them as expendable assets, to be thrown forward whenever the line falters. Even in moments of rest, Ogryns are drilled, ordered to march in circles, to lift weights until their arms shake, to recite catechisms they barely understand. They are told that obedience is salvation, that service is glory, that the Emperor himself smiles upon their sacrifice. They repeat the words dutifully, not out of conviction, but because they fear the lash. And yet, even in this living hell, faint traces of humanity remain. Some Ogryns sing in the dark, low, rumbling songs remembered from their primitive homeworlds. They hum about mountains and rivers they will never see again. They tell one another stories in simple phrases, tales where giants are heroes, not slaves. These moments are fragile, quickly silenced when an overseer approaches, but they exist. They prove that even in chains, the Ogryns are more than beasts. The camps are prisons without bars, cages disguised as barracks. They are places where hope is rationed more strictly than food, where survival is measured in obedience, where every sunrise is another march into blood and mud. And for the Ogryns, there is no escape. The Imperium has written their destiny, and in that script there is only one ending: to die as slaves on a battlefield that will not remember their names. When the sirens wail, when the sky turns red with the glare of orbital fire, the Ogryns know it is time. They do not understand strategy. They do not know the names of the planets on which they fight. What they understand is the horn, the crack of the overseer's whip, the commissar's booming voice. It means forward. It always means forward. Ogryns are the first to climb from the trenches when dawn is still ash-grey, their colossal bodies silhouetted against a sky split open by artillery fire. Guardsmen huddle behind them, eyes wide, clutching lasguns like children clinging to wooden toys. The Ogryns rise, not because they are brave, but because they have been told to. The chain of command pulls at their necks like an iron leash, and so they step into the storm. The battlefield is not a place for giants. It is a furnace designed to consume them. Bullets snap through the air like hornets, punching into Ogryn flesh, but still they advance. Shrapnel carves their skin, flamers boil it from their bones. They carry ripper guns the size of cannons, spitting shells that shred enemy lines. They carry slabs of metal welded into makeshift shields, planting them into the mud so guardsmen can shelter behind. They are a wall of moving muscle, a tide of flesh and fury crashing against the enemy. But walls break, tides recede. For every charge, dozens fall. Their deaths are rarely quick. An Ogryn can take a dozen bullets, a spear of shrapnel, a burning gout of promethium before his knees buckle. He dies in stages, first dropping his weapon, then clutching his stomach, then staggering forward 3 more steps before collapsing. Sometimes, he does not even collapse, he fights until his heart has pumped out every last drop of blood. To the Imperium, this is proof of loyalty. To the Ogryn, it is simply what he was told to do. The enemy fears them, yes. To face an Ogryn in close combat is to face a mountain that punches like a thunderclap. Orcs, Tyranids, even Chaos cultists break beneath their fists. But the fear is short-lived, because no matter how strong a giant is, no matter how loud his roar, the battlefield has more bullets than he has heartbeats. And when the smoke clears, the ground is littered with their bodies, great hulks lying twisted in the mud, their faces slack, their eyes wide with confusion, as though even in death they never understood why they were sent to die. There are moments, brief and terrible, when an Ogryn realizes the truth of his role. When he sees the guardsman, he shielded retreats safely while he is left behind, riddled with wounds. When he hears the commissar call for another charge, knowing he cannot survive another step. When he feels the betrayal in his bones but cannot name it, because no one ever taught him the word. His last thought, before darkness takes him, is often not of glory or honor, but of something heartbreakingly small, the taste of bread, the sound of laughter, the warmth of a mother's hand. And yet the Imperium calls this valor. They will inscribe, faithful to the end, in records that no one will ever read. They will cite the number of enemies killed, the lines broken, the objectives seized. They will praise the regiment, but not the Ogryn. His name will not be spoken. His body will be dumped in a mass grave, ashes mingled with mud, indistinguishable from the thousands who came before. This is the battlefield for the Ogryns, not a place of victory, but a slaughterhouse. A place where their bodies are consumed like ammunition, where their deaths are inevitable, where their very existence is reduced to a line in a commissar's report. Expendables utilized as intended. They are the living weapons of the Imperium, and like all weapons, they are used until they break. The Imperium likes to believe the Ogryns are too simple to know fear, too dull to comprehend suffering. It is easier that way, easier to command them, easier to throw them into the furnace without hesitation. To the Administratum, they are numbers on a manifest. To the Commissar, they are living shields. To the Guard, they are tools. But the truth is more complicated and infinitely sadder. An Ogryn does not think in strategies or philosophies, but he feels. He feels hunger gnawing at him like a rat in his belly. He feels the sting of the overseer's whip, and though he may not curse the man, his eyes water with pain. He feels loneliness more acutely than most, because he does not understand why the small men laugh together, share stories together, while he sits apart, a hulking shadow no one speaks to unless it is to bark an order. They long for simple kindnesses, a word of praise, a pat on the shoulder, a scrap of food shared. These are treasures to them, treasures greater than medals or oaths. When a guardsman calls one friend, the Ogryn will remember it until his last breath. Some carve little tokens of their comrades into scraps of wood, crude, childlike figurines carried in pouches over their heart. Others keep scraps of cloth from uniforms, or broken lasgun pieces, holding them close like charms. And they remember. Their minds may be slow, but memory clings stubbornly. An Ogryn can remember the voice of his mother counting out his share of bread, the shade of a tree on his homeworld, the warmth of a sibling's laughter. These fragments haunt them because they have no place in the life they now lead. A life of mud, of bullets, of endless commands. In quiet moments, rare, precious, dangerous, some Ogryns hum broken songs, melodies passed down through generations. They hum of mountains, rivers, blue skies. They hum of places they will never return to. This is the true tragedy. The Ogryns know something is missing. They cannot name it, cannot articulate it. But deep in their vast chests, in the slow beating of their hearts, they know they were meant for more than this. They know they were meant to live, not only to die, but the Imperium does not care for such feelings. To the Imperium, feelings are liabilities, and so the Ogryns carry their quiet sadness in silence. The burden of souls too simple to rebel and too human to stop hurting. There are stories whispered by soldiers who fought alongside them, stories of Ogryns who wept like children after a battle, cradling the lifeless body of a guardsman they had sworn to protect. Stories of giants who refused to let go of a comrade's corpse, even as commissars threatened them with summary execution. Stories of Ogryns who spoke their friends' names again and again, as though repeating them could bring them back. These tales rarely make it into official records. The Imperium prefers stories of obedience, not grief. And yet, despite everything, the Ogryns remain loyal. They march when told to march, fight when told to fight, die when told to die. Not because they are mindless beasts, but because in their simplicity, loyalty is all they have. The Emperor, the Commissar, the regiment, these are the only constants in their lives, the only truths they are allowed to cling to. In a universe where everything else has been stripped away, obedience becomes their only comfort. But it is a hollow comfort, because it leaves no space for freedom, no space for dreams, no space for peace. And so the Ogryns live in chains, chains forged not only of steel and whip, but of the very faith and loyalty that make them so valuable to the Imperium. Chains that bind their bodies to the battlefield, and their souls to an empire that will never see them as anything but expendable. The order came at dawn, though dawn was little more than a smear of blood-orange light over a ruined horizon. The enemy was massing, and the line would break unless someone held the choke point. The Commissar's voice cut through the morning like a guillotine. Ogryns forward. Brooke lumbered from the trench, his ripper gun clutched in both hands, his breath steaming in the cold air. Around him, other Ogryns rose too, their massive silhouettes like statues dragged unwillingly into motion. Behind them, guardsmen crouched low, letting the giants take the first storm of fire. The earth shook as the Ogryns advanced, each step a drumbeat in the dirge of war. The enemy came fast, twisted heretics of chaos, screaming praises to their dark gods. Bolts of plasma tore through the air. Brooke felt the heat sear across his arm, but he did not stop. He fired into the horde, shells shredding flesh and bone, bodies exploding in clouds of gore. Around him, his brothers roared their wordless battle cries, each one a mix of terror and obedience. Then Brooke saw it, a guardsman, barely more than a boy, pinned beneath the wreckage of a collapsed barricade. The boy's lasgun was broken, his face pale with fear. "Help!" he cried, though his voice was lost in the chaos. Brooke didn't think. He moved. He dropped his gun, wrapped his enormous hands around the twisted metal, and heaved. With a roar, he ripped the barricade aside and pulled the boy free. The boy stared up at him with wide eyes and whispered the words Brooke had always longed to hear. "Thank you, brother." For a moment, Brooke felt warmth bloom inside his chest. Not from fire, not from orders, but from something purer recognition. The moment didn't last. A bolt round slammed into his gut, tearing through flesh. Another ripped his shoulder open. Brooke staggered, but he planted his feet and pushed the boy toward the trench. "Go," he grunted, though his words were thick with blood. The boy hesitated, but then ran, vanishing into the smoke. Brooke turned back to the enemy, his vision blurred, but he lifted his gun again. He fired until the barrel glowed, until the weapon jammed, until his arms shook with exhaustion. Still they came, and still he fought. Bullets tore his flesh. Flames licked across his skin. His legs gave way, but he forced them to stand. His body was breaking, but his will, simple, stubborn, loyal, held fast. When the end came, it was not with fear. It was with memory. Brooke remembered a hill where the sky had been blue, where his mother had counted 1, 2, 3 as she broke bread. He remembered laughter. He remembered warmth. He died with those memories, clutching them like talismans as the world turned dark. The guardsmen retook the trench that day. The commissar praised the usefulness of the Ogryn charge. The regiment moved on, leaving behind broken giants in the mud. Brooke's name was never recorded. His sacrifice was never sung. His body was thrown into a pit with the others, burned and buried without ceremony. But somewhere, in the heart of a single young guardsman who lived because of him, Brooke remained a brother. Conclusion: this is the living hell of the Ogryns. To fight battles they do not choose, to die deaths no one remembers, to live lives measured only in orders followed. They are slaves in all but name, giants bound by loyalty and fear, wielded as weapons until they break. And yet, within their massive frames, there beats something undeniably human, a longing for kindness, a hunger for recognition, a memory of lives that could have been. The Imperium will never see them as more than expendable. History will not mark their names. But the truth is this: in their pain, in their loyalty, in their tragic simplicity, the Ogryns embody the cruel paradox of the 41st millennium. In a galaxy where there is only war, even the strongest are still slaves. And the Ogryns, chained from birth to death, will forever march into battle, living out a tragedy no hymn will ever mourn. The Ogryns are living proof of the Imperium's cruelty, a regime that will not hesitate to turn anything, or anyone, into a tool. They are not warriors by choice. They are not heroes by destiny. They are slaves, shackled from the moment of birth, bred and broken, to serve a war they can never understand. Their hell is not only found on the battlefield, where their bodies are torn apart for the sake of victory. It begins at the very instant they draw breath, in camps and pens where obedience is hammered into their skulls, where the word freedom has no meaning. They are denied dignity, denied names, denied the simple right to exist as more than flesh and bone for the Emperor's endless crusade. And so their story is not one of honor. It is not one of glory. It is a story of tragedy, of chains, of lives that pass without record or remembrance. In Warhammer 40,000, there is only war, and in that endless war, there are countless lives the galaxy will never speak of again. Among them are the Ogryns, the forgotten giants, condemned to carry a living hell upon their shoulders in service to an empire that will never thank them.